Gwynneth Malin. I'm the director of the NYU Center for the Humanities, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you here to this special event on behalf of our center. And that's our staff, Chris Alexander, Denny Valentine, Alexandria Martinez, Jane Tylis, and Ulrich Baer. So thank you for being here. This event is part of our Environmental Humanities series, which Uli will speak to you more about, which has been arranged as a collaborative effort with Animal Studies Initiative and the Environmental Studies Program and our center, and much championing by Yanula Athanasics, who's back there at the back. She's doing something, organizing something back there she's very good at. So a big thank you to all of our partners for working on this series. Tonight we really have a special panel for you. It's going to be a conversation with Kip Andersen and Keegan Kuhn, who brought us the important documentary Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret. And many of you might have seen this film. It's streaming on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, you can go watch it tonight. And we did have a screening last night as well. It's a compelling film that tackles the cattle industry and its environmental footprint and explores why leading environmental organizations are not talking about this issue. I was telling Kip and Keegan that I enjoyed watching this film with my family upstate a few weeks back, and it sparked a huge discussion, actually, about small family farms and scalability, and also about the idea of linking a personal habit, such as diet, with global environmental issues. The film's garnered a lot of attention and from the media, and we're going to talk about that tonight as well. So Chris Schlottmann will moderate our discussion tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Chris, and then really turn the evening over to him with a quick interlude from Uli in between. Chris Schlottmann is Clinical Associate Professor of Environmental Studies at New York University, and he's also the Associate Chair of the Department of Environmental Studies. He teaches courses on food, animals, and the environment, and climate and society. His research focuses on ethics of food, animals, and the environment, and he's actually writing 2 books at the moment. So Chris, we're really happy to have you here to introduce our panelists and to moderate the discussion, and Uli's going to pop up for a few minutes and talk about our series.
So thank you very much, Gwynneth, and thank you everybody for coming. As Gwynneth said, we are running the series on environmental humanities in the Center for the Humanities, and I thought I'd say 2 words of why we're doing this here and what we're trying to do. So we're trying to address the issue of environmentalism and environmental justice from as many different angles as possible, and we found that they are political, sociological, ethical, health-related, environmental, moral, sociological concerns that intersect in these conversations. And what we try to do is to bring as many people into this conversation who are addressing it from particular angles and seeing where these places intersect. We think of the humanities as the place where things that are yet unresolved and where you don't have the right frames of reference to respond to a question could be examined. So all of you in the room are invited to participate. Chris is going to invite you to a Q&A. I'm really happy to see a lot of students. I'm really happy that Kip and Keegan are here. Really kind of people who sort of challenge our assumptions, our conscience, really also 2 real troublemakers. So I'm really, so what they're going to say here, is really sort of pushing sort of some of the assumptions of what we try to think of as what is proper behavior. And I also want to point out we have Michelle McHacken and Dominic Thompson in the front row. They're going to do the next event on vegan athletes. So thank you for coming to your preview of what you're doing in a couple of weeks. And we're going to have several more events, as you've seen from the posters. And everybody in this room, you're invited to come to us with ideas of what you would like to see featured. This is a collaborative effort, as Gwynneth said. We want to keep this conversation open. We think NYU, as a global university, has a lot of need for this conversation, a lot of opportunities. So we're trying to invite people into this rather than knowing already what we're going to find. So I'll turn it over to you, and thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Uli, and everyone who made this happen. This is pretty exciting. So I'll introduce our 2 speakers, give a little bit of an introduction, then we'll have a conversation open up to the floor. Kip Andersen, gentleman directly to my left. His environmental awakening came as the result of an inconvenient truth. After seeing the film, he began to recycle religiously, turn off lights constantly, shower infrequently, and ride a bike instead of driving. Andersen believed he was doing everything he could to help the planet by following the guidelines of national and international environmental organizations, but his life took a different direction when he found out animal agriculture is the leading cause of environmental destruction. He's the founder of AUM Films and Media, a 501c3 nonprofit focused on creating films and media that promote thrivability, compassion, and harmony for all life. He's also... He's also an entrepreneur, as well as a certified Jivamukti and Kundalini yoga teacher. He's a graduate of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo School of Business and has called San Francisco home for more than a decade. Keegan Kuhn is a videographer, award-winning documentary filmmaker, and professional musician living in the East Bay of San Francisco. He's worked with nonprofit organizations and has been involved in social justice movements for virtually his entire life. As a filmmaker, he helps organizations reach an ever greater community of supporters with the highest possible quality films and videos. His film career has taken him as far as the remote interior of Alaska to document modern homesteaders, the high deserts of the American West filming the nation's remaining wild horses, to rural agricultural communities and dirty urban streets. He's motivated by a deep desire to shed light on untold stories of the most downtrodden in our society and to raise awareness through greater visibility of social justice issues. So just by way of giving a little bit of context to the film and hopefully our conversation, a decade ago, the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization came out with a study called Livestock's Long Shadow. This is the same year as An Inconvenient Truth came out, which notably didn't mention agriculture or animals significantly. This study put livestock in context as a major driver of environmental change. And as we increasingly see the urgency of climate change, we've also paid more attention to greenhouse gases like methane and nitrous oxide, which are quite prevalent in the agricultural sector. And a lot has changed in 10 years. Since this study has come out, we've seen a shift from basically no awareness of the role of livestock in climate change to recommendations from the former IPCC chair, and we see Al Gore and Bill Clinton professing their veganism for environmental reasons. So 2014 comes along, and Cowspiracy is released. To my knowledge, it's the first film to focus on animal agriculture as a major environmental driver of global climate change, and opens a really meaningful conversation about our behavior, our environmental values and policies, as well as how environmental groups choose their priorities and think about these issues. And before my first question, I want to also kind of put in context how relevant this particular approach to thinking about climate change is. So this past fall in Paris, we saw a tremendous amount of progress towards some sort of international action on climate change. And we set ourselves a carbon budget. We said we're going to aim for 2 degrees Celsius and 1.5 degrees Celsius total global warming, and we want it by a certain date. So we said we have only so much more of the atmospheric sink to use up. And so a couple people looked at this carbon budget, and they looked at projections of increased animal-based food consumption in the global middle class, and determined that that itself would take up our entire carbon budget. So this really means that this is an issue that has to be picked up and addressed in kind of a forthright, direct manner, because in some sense the clock is ticking. So I have a set of different questions, and I want to preface them with some praise. So one of the great challenges of filmmaking and environmental engagement and advocacy is to tell stories that accurately portray a real problem, but do so evocatively in a way that makes sense. It's kind of simple, but not too simplified. To be provocative, but still being kind of true to the facts. This is especially challenging with environmental problems like climate change for a number of reasons. The first is the scale of these problems. They're global, they're far away. We don't see them very easily. They're often invisible. And numbers are often central to our understanding of these issues, but also incredibly difficult to communicate. And so one of the stories you told that I thought was very impressive was showing us kind of basically with cool little graphics, the scale of the environmental impact of animal ag as it related to things that we traditionally think of as the big environmental issues, the length of our showers, energy consumption and things like that. So that was one of the noteworthy things you did with the storytelling that was impressive. The second of many is making problems and solutions easier to perceive and see. Our minds are not particularly well evolved to see global invisible problems, and the people who contribute to things like climate change are very dispersed. And so one example of how the film told us the global story and then kind of brought it home that I particularly liked, and maybe we can talk about, is the shift from the backyard slaughter to the chicken in the passenger seat kind of moving along, right? We went from numbers, global issues, right, this large abstract stuff, to something that we can kind of tangibly kind of understand and see coming home. So this leads into my first question, kind of how do you bring these big problems back home to a more local, easy to see scale that's still kind of accurate? It's not us taking shorter showers and doing these little things that take a lot of energy with marginal environmental gain, kind of bring these larger issues back home. And then the second half of this kind of question about storytelling is how do we tell environmentally positive stories? So it's easy to kind of find all kind of horrible environmental stories, right? There's a lot of tragedy when it comes to these things, but we also want to tell a positive vision. We want to motivate, we want to get people engaged in an environmental story that depicts a possibly better future.
Yeah, I think that how we get people to pay attention to these issues is to make it emotionally engaging. We have, if you just talk to me, when Kip and I first started working on this film, we thought, oh, well, this will be, we have all the statistics, we have all these studies, and we can just show it. But we realized a 90-minute film of just numbers and how bad the situation was isn't going to be engaging. No one's going to want to watch that. I don't want to watch that. So it became really clear that the film actually had to have a protagonist. It had to follow Kip's true story of what he went through. So the film, you know, you give them something to identify with. And that's why I think what we really did with Cowspiracy is we allow the audience to take the journey with Kip.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the second part of the question was
the kind of the positive stories.
Well, that's what, making the film, it did get really, really dark. And some people wonder if we exaggerated when we put down the camera, and we really didn't. Once we interviewed Howard Lyman, he scared us really bad when we were thinking. I mean, we still haven't done it. Someday we're gonna put out that entire interview. Because by the end of it, we were saying when we release this film, should we go to Cuba for 6 months or a year? And we were not joking. It was scary. And then interviewing Will Potter as well. Green is the New Red. But then once we said, okay, this is dark. We have to do this no matter what. Because if we don't do anything, we're not going to be around here anyway. So what's the point of living? Of our, basically the global fear of not doing something how to supersede that of any individual fear or doing something. So once we got past that point, we said, wait, maybe there's this transformation already happening that we're not looking at. This is what's been going on for so long. Let's start look at this transformation that is happening. So we started to look at the light side of things and kind of the next step. And then we realized, wow, this is happening so fast. Everybody is waking up. We just didn't realize it. People who are billionaires like Bill Gates and Biz Stone and even Al Gore, they're investing millions and millions of dollars in these new plant-based products. And they're doing it not even for ethical reasons. They're doing it because they see the future of things that we weren't even looking at the time. Where it's almost like these people already knew it, and a lot of people already know it, that raising animals for food is not sustainable at any level. And so once we started focusing on this and all these incredible companies that are happening, that's when we saw inspiring things that are happening so fast. And then to have a whole film on just that, though, that can get old. So it's good to expose the truth and then to see in a positive way rather than just pure fear-based how to inspire. And, ideally we did that of just it feels good to do the right thing. And then the health-wise is a whole nother bonus,
Right. It's a kind of a win-win, win. A lot of winning.
A lot of winning.
Yeah. So another thing that was quite noteworthy about Calspiracy was also about kind of the story you guys told. And so there's a lot of popular press books and films about food and the environment, and the story they very often tell is that with industrialization came the environmental harm, the health harm, all of these other kind of damages, right? So that's the Omnivores Dilemma story, that's Food Inc., that's, a lot of stories. And Cowspiracy really doesn't quite take that tack. It really takes the is it animals or not kind of as the distinction between is it environmentally impactful or not. And in my research, of course, I've found that to be generally empirically justified. And so I find this really interesting because you guys are telling the story of this, right? Of how do we communicate this kind of shorthand of what's environmentally damaging or not. And yet a lot of people aren't really picking up on that kind of way of telling that story. And so could you talk a little bit about how you came to that realization, also kind of maybe challenges to telling that story?
I think, what was good is we almost started the film with giving the viewer credit that you already know factory farming is bad. So we didn't have to dive into that. So going into, pretty quickly going into grass-fed beef, going into organic, like it's exactly what we said. Is there any possible way, like my character is kind of what happened to me, say it's been actually 7 or 8 years since I've been vegan. Is there any possible way beyond ethically, can I sustainably do this? And then so we dive into grass-fed, and ironically, grass-fed when you're talking about wildlife and land use, it's more unsustainable than factory farming when you're talking about those two specific things, and you talk about methane. That's when it gets controversial, but it's still unsustainable. And then we go into, again, as you said, the organic side of things, and then into eventually backyard farming. Mm-hmm. Is there any possible way I can feel good about doing this for myself or for the planet, and covering every single basis rather than kind of going almost all the way there and then giving this kind of soft conclusion where there's just no possible way to do this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, exactly as you said. I mean, books like Omnivores Dilemma and films like Food Inc. brought the conversation to where we are today. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they failed to look at the entire picture. And the reality is that most environmental destruction, it wasn't just the industrialization of agriculture. Deforestation has been happening since we started agriculture. And that's the root of much of the environmental ills we're facing today.
Yeah. So kind of a different direction just generally. So it comes back to the provocative title and kind of one of the theses of the film, that there's kind of a conspiracy to not talk about these things, probably because of the donor base or something along those lines. And so part of me was wondering what if it's not a conspiracy? What if we're not that good at getting environmental groups coordinated, but it's just a common cultural attitude or a psychological defense mechanism, or I don't want to change my diet? If it's something kind of a little bit more psychological, reactive, cultural, rather than something more intentional and broadly spread.
Well, what's funny, first off, with the name Calspiracy actually first came on joking that maybe this is a conspiracy of the cows, as almost like their jihad of them sacrificing themselves and their children and their, to get humans addicted to their breast milk and to kill all themselves, but to procreate at the same time and take over the planet. And this was their conspiracy, and that was originally where Cowspiracy came from. And then we didn't
we scrapped that idea.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is that as it evolved and we did interview these organizations, because we had a pretty specific outline before doing the film. And I don't know if you're going to ask this, but even the more motivation for making this film was beyond the tragedy that's happening and the destruction from animal agriculture. It was the fact that for, in the film I think I say months, but it was for years I would been trying to contact these organizations. And I was so pissed off at them, and I took it personally because this is such a, it should be so illegal. They should be in jail for this. Like, I was so passionate about how can you be in existence, and this is such an urgent topic, and you're not talking about this. And then when we started interviewing them, realizing it's actually worse than we thought. All they could have said, any one of these organizations, you know what, you're right. We just have a really hard time sending this message. We haven't done a good job, you're right. And then for them to cover it up or to be ignorant about it, and a lot of people say we manipulated the editing. These interviews were all 2 hours long, and the more you watch of these interviews, again, we want to release more of them, but what's the point? The more bizarre, the more cover up it is, and then we realize it is a conspiracy. And then some people debate about that is, well, is it a conspiracy? And if you look up, the definition of conspiracy, it's knowing. Essentially, it's like knowing you're doing something wrong, but covering it up. What's it exact? It's been a while, but it's essentially knowing that you're partaking in something that is illegal, it should be illegal, and doing something that's wrong, yet covering it up. And these organizations, especially when you talk to the Rainforest Action Network. She was the most frustrating interview. She knew exactly what we were going at. Sometimes when we're interviewing people like from the NRDC, National Resource Defense Council, she legitimately knows. She's the one who started laughing, which is really funny, where she really didn't know. But some of them knew, and they knew what we were getting at. They knew what we wanted. We were just asking what's unsustainable. And for them to cover up that information, what is going on here? And then when we talk to the animal agriculture industry, that there is crossover, that there is reasons why they're doing these cover-ups, because there's crossover for funding. It is a conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, this is the most destructive industry on the planet today. I mean, it's the leading cause of anthropogenic greenhouse gases, water pollution, water consumption, topsoil erosion, deforestation, Amazon destruction, species extinction. I mean, literally anything you could care about for the environment, animal agriculture is at the forefront. And for these organizations not to have it as their forefront campaign, or at least even mention it on their websites, it definitely points to something more sinister. And you can look at the funding of some of these organizations. They get money from the livestock industry. Something we chose not to focus on in the film, because at that point in the film we just said, hey, let's just focus on the positive. But there's a willingness. They don't want to talk about this. Mm-hmm. And then the organizations that do talk about it, though, it's actually been beneficial. It's increased their donorship. It's actually benefited. And there's the Center for Biological Diversity has a campaign called Take Extinction Off Your Plate, where they advocate for people to limit or eliminate animal products from their diet. And when they launched that campaign, their donorship went up. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where they don't have to worry about losing donors. This is potentially is more about personal change and where it's coming from in their own lives.
Right. So as I mentioned before, this is really kind of coming onto people's radars, and you guys are in the vanguard when it comes to the storytelling. And so we are seeing things shift pretty quickly, and the same is true for the awareness and political willingness to deal with climate change. And I've heard from colleagues that some environmental groups that were on the wrong side of this story are kind of slowly coming around. And so I'm wondering if you anticipate, like other people who want to solve problems, that your film would be obsolete in 10 years because, right, people have kind of picked up on this and
that's the hope.
That would be awesome.
I mean, we are seeing Rainforest Action Network, which Kip said, was one of the most frustrating interviews, because Lindsay Allen, the executive director of Rainforest Action Network, she used to be Greenpeace's Amazonian leather campaign director, which they had an entire campaign against leather coming out of the Amazon because of the destruction caused. This was back in the 90s. So she knew all about this. She knew for sure that animal agriculture is a leading cause of Amazonian rainforest destruction. And yes, she didn't want to mention it. But since the film has come out, they actually now have a campaign on their website called Food Justice, where they address animal agriculture as a leading cause of rainforest destruction and a primary cause of greenhouse gases. So there are changes being made. It's just, are they doing it fast enough? And it's always putting things into perspective in comparison. When we talk about fracking, we have to compare it to animal agriculture to put things in perspective. These are all important issues. It's not that we want these organizations to drop talking about fossil fuels or coal-burning power plants. It's important to talk about all those issues, absolutely, but it's always put them into perspective.
And even fossil fuels, that's one thing that the one thing that people really focus on with this film, or they'll debate against it, whether it's 18% cause animal agriculture is caused by greenhouse gases, 18%, 51%, climate change, and to realize that even if we solve climate change, if climate change was solved tomorrow and you do not solve the issue of animal agriculture, say we have global cooling all of a sudden, we still have species extinction at a rate that's unbelievable. We have decimated the wolves and the bears and the cougars and all this, and just in North America alone. But then you have the rainforest destruction. You have the water. We're from California. We have no more. Our aquifers are getting dried up. Our ocean dead zones. The oceans are getting up to 90% of major fisheries are gone. So even if you solve this climate change, animal agriculture is completely destroying the planet. So that's why, to focus on this one-stop shop for every single one of these things, it has to be really the focus along with these other things.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I look forward to having that conversation once we've solved climate change, what else we're going to deal with, right? Yeah. So let's open it up to the floor. Someone will go around with a mic. Is it Gwynneth? And then we're going to do some Q&A and then actually watch a trailer for an upcoming film and then have some more questions.
Before we do the Q&A, could I just say, because we do a bunch of these, what makes things run really smooth is questions, not statements. If you have a statement you want to make, that's great. We can do that later. If you have a question, that's really the best thing. It's most entertaining for everybody.
I saw your film yesterday in the NYU lab, and I'm overwhelmed on my way to being a vegan, I hope.
Awesome.
And of course, you're aware of the confrontation up in Oregon. I think Bundy and his, with the help of, I'm going to emphasize, with the help of the FBI and the state police, at least 25 were arrested. You know, do you feel that cooperation is not, you know, I mean, nothing's going to be done. But how do you feel about that, working with, you know, not directly, but, you know, not being hostile to the FBI and state police?
Yeah, so for those who don't know about it, there was this group of radical ranchers that took over a wildlife preserve up in Oregon. And they were cutting down fences because they wanted to graze cattle on these wildlife preserves. Right now, most of the U.S.'s public lands are grazed by private ranchers. The government leases the land to private ranchers, which is public land that we all own collectively, to graze their animals. And not only is the grazing detrimental to the land, but it also, you know, interferes with wildlife. And so you see policies like wild horses being rounded up in mass to make room for more cows. You see, you know, massive predator killing, like 36,000 coyotes were killed last year by the U.S. government because they're considered a threat to the livestock industry. On and on and on. I think that working with authorities to stop, for example, poaching or from, you know, radical ranchers who are doing these sort of things, great, this is important, and that's something that should be used. Sadly, the U.S. government has often sided with the livestock industry because they can make money, they get money, these are their constituents, and so they allow this sort of abuse to happen. So when we see, radical revolutionary ranchers who want to overthrow the U.S. government so they can graze their cattle on our land, they already are. They already have permission from the U.S. government. They just pay a penance of what they would be if it was on public or private land. I think we do all have to work together. And that was one of the things, kind of the criticism that we got for Cowspiracy is people said, well, you know, you guys are attacking the good guys. You're going after these environmental organizations that are doing good work. You know, we should all be working together. And that's great. We've wanted to work together with these groups. We've wanted to work together with the U.S. government. We're wanting to work with anybody. Anyone and everyone who will talk about this issue, we'll work with them. Sadly, is that they've all refused. They don't want to talk about this issue, or they've had to be coerced into talking about it through pressure campaigns. But absolutely, we should use every tool at our disposal to address this issue forefront.
You know, I'm just curious. So the fossil fuel industry is under such attack, and there's all sorts of ways. You know, they've got a lot of PR people, even like grassroots mobilization, whatever. So this may be a strange question, but I found myself, when I was watching the first 10 minutes of your film, I was like, you know, if I was an oil and gas person, I'd be thinking like, I want to promote this movie, right? And that's no criticism of you, like you're just saying, let's put it in perspective, right? But I'm just curious if you found that you know you've had some strange bedfellows, maybe at least on chat rooms you see that like. It's
actually really Shell and Chevron film that you know, people get that and are like, you know, I wish they gave us some. No, people said that, but. Yeah, that's actually what's funny about that is when we interviewed these organizations, I don't think it came up because, again, we only had 3 to 5 minutes to concentrate this editing down to make it a 90-minute film. So we say, you guys are going up against the oil industry. Like, how big and badass or mean and evil is the oil fossil fuel industry and what they do and who they are, and, you know, that everyone knows that they're bad. And, you know, yet you're fighting them, but not the animal agriculture industry, and that just shows you how powerful the animal agriculture industry is. I mean, it's unbelievable. But we were blown away, but you know, essentially by that.
Yeah, I mean, people have said they're like, oh, you know, Cowspiracy was funded by the fossil fuel industry, which is funny to me because animal agriculture is a huge consumer of fossil fuels. I mean, there's a statistic that it takes upwards of 90 gallons of crude oil to produce 1 pound of beef in the United States conventionally. So it's like this industry is hand in hand with the fossil fuel industry. I mean, they're all fed, chemically grown grains, the fertilizers, the pesticides, the herbicides, they all come from fossil fuels, the transportation. I mean, this industry consumes fossil fuels at an extreme rate. But and again, we're not trying to downplay the impacts of the fossil fuel industry. It's absolutely has to stop. But again, it's just putting things in perspective. We just have to. We're looking at fossil fuels as the big bad issue, and it absolutely is a big bad issue. But it's the little brother to animal agriculture.
Hi, I'm Mia MacDonald from Brighter Green, and once upon a time an environmental studies instructor here at NYU in a course on animal agriculture and climate change. Although pre-Cowspiracy, or I would have showed the film. But we're doing a lot of work in China around factory farming and meat consumption, and as you know, because we've been in touch with you, and you did a chat with some of our network in China, there's a lot of interest in Cowspiracy in China. And I wonder what you all make of that. Why do you think that is? Because this issue is not terribly well known in China yet. It's just kind of emerging. So I've been fascinated by that, so I want to know what you made of it.
Yeah, and we are overjoyed that there's been an interest in the film in China. Sadly, China's meat consumption is going up and up every single year. As per capita income goes up, we see this around the world. People start to move towards a more Western diet, and sadly, that's to the detriment of the planet. I think there's an interest in China because you have a massive population that is looking for information. Just like everywhere in the world, I think most people are looking for information, but I think we're seeing a larger percentage in China. Again, well, maybe I don't even know if it's a percentage. It's just the fact that you've got over 1 billion people in the one country. A lot of times, though, when we talk about meat consumption, and people are willing to talk about it, they say, oh, yeah, you're right. China and India's meat consumption is going up. We've got to stop that. And absolutely it needs to stop. But they still are only consuming a fraction of what we consume in the United States. The United States has some of the highest meat consumptions anywhere in the world. So while China's consumption is going up, it still is not matched by the United States per capita. This is a global issue. It's not a developing countries issue. It's not a first world issue. This is a global issue that affects everybody.
And on a positive that with China is that China looks to the West as, we're very influential on them, especially for the middle class that's growing, to be like Americans or to be like the West. And what's great is that now the meat consumption per capita in the US is going down, and dairy is going way down dramatically. So as they see this, they're going to say, wait, now what are they doing? They want to be, what's the new cool thing to do? And they are going to quickly, especially over the next 3 years, as this information along with health comes out, they'll see this is not cool. It's not a privilege. It's a privilegeable thing, but it's not something that they want to adhere to. And the whole transformation will soon be, this next level. Like to think of evolution to this plant-based. So we feel it's happening, but we're the ones leading the way. And what's great is the tipping point already did happen. And so now it's going down, and now it's going to rapidly go down over these next 3 years. It's going to be unbelievable how fast this transformation takes place.
I'm a student at Pratt Institute of Art in Brooklyn, and I wanted to ask, thinking about filmmaking as an art form, how do you see the role of art in making visible global environmental issues like animal agriculture?
I mean, I think that, I know for myself personally, my life has been changed by art. I mean, I became vegan because of a hardcore band called Earth Crisis that talked about the issue. I changed my life because of a film called Earthlings that talked about animal agriculture or our treatment of animals. So I know firsthand that art and film and music and media can make a huge impact. Personally, that's where I put all of my time and energy because I think it is one of the absolute most effective ways that we can bring about real change. It's one of those ways that it can cross cultures. It can cross barriers that, giving a talk, gets stuck at. So I think absolutely it's one tool that we can use, but I think it's one of the most effective tools we can use.
And I think we mentioned this earlier, but a big tip or something where when we were creating the outline for this film is the goal was like, let's make this a comedy. And it's such a bizarre bizarre concept. How can you make something so bad? You know, it's like, we like to think it's a tragic comedy, but if you watch it, the first time you watch the film, you don't really see the comedic aspects in it. But if you've seen it 2 or 3 times, there's a lot of funny parts in it. So to have something engaging where it's not just something evil, or, you know, Earthlings is a little more hardcore for everyone, but to follow a narrative, so you follow a journey, make it somewhat appealing so you hit on all the emotions, and engaging and simple at the same time. That was our goal of the film. And to not tell anyone what to do. If you watch the film, we never tell anyone what to do too, and I think people appreciate that.
I'm also a student at Pratt, and I was curious what do you think of alternative productions of protein, like cricket farms and laboratory meat, and how that can like supplement, or do you think that's also kind of like wrong?
Yeah. So there's been a big movement towards insect farming, or at least it's been talked about. Media's picked up on it a lot. Or lab-grown meat, or new advances in technology, foods, and things like that. And I think those are all interesting, but we don't have a food issue on this planet. We grow enough food to feed 10 to 15 billion people. It's allocation. We're not in a protein-deficient world. We're in an allocation issue. We're feeding half of the world's grain to non-human animals. We have close to 1 billion people every single day are hungry. 700 million humans don't get enough calories every single day. It's because we're feeding the wrong animals. We should be feeding human beings, not non-humans. So when it comes to cricket farming, that I don't think is a solution. It's touted as, we can feed them waste products, and so then it's a sustainable method. Well, one, you have to get over this whole cultural aspect. Does anybody in this room want to eat insects? Doesn't seem like very appealing to me. And then 2, there's also a racial aspect of it, a racist aspect of it, in that it's often pushed as, this is how we'll feed the third world. Well, that's really offensive to me. The thought of saying, hey, we'll tell other people in other countries to eat crickets. Again, we don't have a protein issue on this planet. We don't have, there's going to the positive of the plant-based foods, or meat alternatives or lab-grown meats. Those are all interesting and great, but we already have the solution. Just eat plants. We don't need a new technology food to come along to feed the world. We have them.
And as you'll see in a new trailer, I don't know if people are familiar with our new films coming out, What the Health, it really explores, it's a protein myth. We've been totally conned in thinking that we need protein, where the majority, especially if you're eating animal products, it's a protein issue. It is, but it's that we need to reduce our protein. And it's the excess animal protein that's causing all these diseases, heart disease, are linked to.
Associated with. We have to be careful with all these heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. And then also too with the cricket, I was at a dinner, and one of the ladies, she has a cricket cracker company, and as I was saying, it's bizarre with crickets because in Asia and a lot of Eastern countries, cricket, Jiminy cricket, it's looked as a very good luck charm. And if you have a cricket in your house, it is a sign of good luck. And if you have a dead cricket, it's a sign of bad luck. And imagine, this is kind of esoteric, but imagine the karmic level of killing something that's regarded as one of the best luck symbols of a species, and to feed even just one person or one cracker. How many crickets you have to raise in a confined system, totally unnatural, and then to kill. It's just kind of sad. From an ethical standpoint too, we should be eating if we're going to eat animals, we should be eating the largest animals, so we have to kill that many less animals. If you believe in consciousness of insects, we're going to have to be killing, trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of insects to even equal, the protein of the cows that we eat.
Or donate.
Hi, I'm Eve. I'm an NYU animal studies student. I think one of the most monumental things about your film is that it really broke out of the animal rights movement and into the mainstream, and that's something that is such a huge goal of ours in the animal rights movement, is that we always feel like we're preaching to the choir and not necessarily reaching those who don't want to hear the message. So what were some of the mechanisms that you guys used to reach such a wide audience?
I think it was a fortunate thing is really that it really did follow my journey, that of, just an everyday guy, years ago, seeing if I can do this. So when you're watching this, say you're eating meat, and you have somewhat of a conscious of maybe not ethics, but of the environment, not even on health, of course, it's environmental film. You just really jump on this journey with me of finding, okay, first you find this, and it leads all the way down the road. So it's very smooth path, even though it's intense, that it just take you along with, where I'm not saying anything whatsoever. I'm not judging. I'm just kind of going on this and finding out what is the truth. So that was definitely the goal of telling the story, of just showing A, B, C, D, E of an everyday person who's just looking to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think what helped to break it out was using a storyline, and then it's not an animal rights film. It's not talking about how we shouldn't kill animals because it's wrong, or morals. I mean, there's an element to that, because I think we can't talk about environmental issues without bringing up ethics and morals. But it's an environmental film through and through. And
and that's the thing. The Center for Humanities, it's such a human rights issue. People talk about animal rights. This is a human rights issue. This is for us to be around for the next 10, 20, 30 years. We solve this problem. Imagine the domino effect of everything that will happen for humans, for us, for our existence to be around for another 20, 30, 40 years. What is a bigger issue for human rights, other than this issue?
Hi, my name is Lynn Davis, and I've been vegan 5 years, and I'm always trying to step up my vegan game, and recently I've been trying to adopt ethical fashion and some other things, and it's really hard to live, purely ethically. I'm really attempting that. And my question to you is, what do you think about the palm oil industry? And there has been a lot of criticism of veganism and of a lot of convenience foods that use palm oil, and also recently Whole Foods gotten a lot of trouble for putting plastic over their oranges and things like that. So what would you say about sort of the shift towards more plant-based foods that also cause other destruction?
Yeah. So palm oil, for those who don't know, is a tropical crop that's grown primarily in Indonesia, and it's being, charged as being one of the most destructive crops on the planet because it threatens orangutan habitat, and it's terribly destructive. It's just horrible what they're doing. They're literally just clearing forests in Indonesia, Sumatran rainforest, to grow this palm kernel. You got to put it in comparison to livestock. 36 million acres of Indonesian rainforest has been cleared for palm oil production versus 160 million acres in just the Amazon for cattle. So cattle is still vastly more destructive. And the truth is that my background before film was agriculture. I spent close to 10 years in organic agriculture. All forms of agriculture are destructive. They're inherently destructive. You're taking an ecosystem and you're shifting it and manipulating it to produce what you want versus what it naturally wants to produce. So all crops are bad. The truth is whether you're eating coconuts or whether you're eating palm or whether you're eating corn or whether you're eating oats, they all have an environmental impact. Most of the world's palm oil is not fed to humans. It's actually fed to livestock. So the most important thing that you can do if you don't want to support the palm industry is to not consume animal products. But I think we all should make ethical choices. We should be looking at, definitely decrease the palm oil. It's a conflict food, absolutely. But we should look at all aspects. We should also be looking at chocolate. And chocolate has a direct link, in at least chocolate produced in Western Africa, to child slavery. These are important issues that we should be looking at, the whole aspect. And really what it comes down to is what we should be eating plant-based foods, organically grown, as close to our home as possible. It's the best way you can avoid conflict foods.
So this raises a really interesting point that goes into a number of domains, including ethics, which is this distinction between kind of doing good and doing right, or something that's like you have to be pure or you have to be better. And I think this is particularly salient when it comes to food and environmental issues because you said all forms of agriculture are destructive, and there's other, I think James McWilliams says farming by definition disrupts nature, right? And so you can't draw this bright line and say it's natural and it's good or it's not. And so that's great. We have a more accurate understanding of the world. But then when it comes into behavioral things, of course, human psychology wants to draw those bright lines, wants to think there's good and pure and whatever, which is part of why conversations about veganism, vegetarianism are always fraught. There's a presumption of purity and a presumption that somebody's attacking someone else. And so I'm wondering how you navigate this. Like, you want to say that this is a bad thing, but you don't want to make any claim to kind of moral purity, which probably can't be backed up anyhow.
Yeah. I mean, for me, veganism as a whole is about doing the least harm. It's not about doing no harm, because good luck at that. It's really about doing as least harm as you can. And, just to know that we all have room to improve. It's like you can be the most, hardcore militant vegan and still have huge inconsistencies in your life, whether you're wearing, sweatshop clothes or you're, driving a car or whatever it is. There's always going to be inconsistencies. So it's about doing the best that you possibly can to minimize, in my opinion, minimizing suffering.
And, as far as I guess maybe you're asking as being an activist or whatever, again, it's just to show the information to people and to inspire, not only say for me, being vegan is a great thing to do for the environment. Is also for me personally that was surprising. Is it got me in alignment who I am as a human species once I found out about health, what I found about biology, and what I felt about loving animals and my ethical that I can be around all animals and look them in the eye, and to have this personal, reconnection with everything, not only myself, but with my family and, all the connections of relationship. That was a total bonus that happened over the next few years. Was really cool. So kind of sharing these stories of cool things that happen, and it's not better or worse. It's just these are the facts. These are the truths. And and that's the thing why people like Cowspiracy. It's just, here's the facts. Do what you want with it. And then, with our new film, it's very powerful because here's the facts about health. If you want to fight it, good luck. You risk it yourself. But so just sharing.
I have a really big question next.
Big question.
How'd you get Leo to help you?
Well, we were on his yacht one day, and his sustainable solar yacht. He actually, it was pretty cool. Our favorite director, top 3 or 4, Darren Aronofsky. Recently, he did Noah But back in the day. Oh, really? Oh, nice.
We brought him here last semester, actually.
Well, a huge influential film for us was, if anyone's seen Pi, one of his first films, and Requiem for a Dream, because it's not only his filmmaking, is his editing and just that edge to him. I think it was PETA gave the film to him, Darren Aronofsky, and while Darren was watching it on a plane or something, during watching it, he called Leo, because they're really good friends, and they're working on a documentary right now, said, "Stop everything you're doing, watch this film, I'm going to send you the link." And he watched it, and the very next day, his right-hand woman, Jennifer Davison, called us, and we thought it was totally fake, that, literally, yeah, whatever, we'll just go along with it, because we got a few of those. And sure enough, within, we followed up, and then 2 days later said he called Netflix personally. He's never called them in his life personally. I do everything for him. I've been with him 10 years. He called the head of Netflix up and said, "You have to get this on. I want to be the executive producer," honorary executive producer. He didn't give us any money or anything. It was just to put his name onto it. It was huge. And can you imagine how we felt just blown away. So that's how it happened. He was just, and the thing with him, to this day, he was the most affected by this film. Forever and ever, he will be the most affected person by this film, because until someone has given $15 to $30 million to everyone from Sierra Club to Oceana to NRDC, he's given millions of dollars, which no one can say they did, and then to watch this film and to realize, oh my God, I've given these organizations millions of dollars and I didn't know this. Can you imagine its entire life turned upside down, and to find the truth out? So that was really cool, and I guess that's truly what happened. Was he was just blown away, and so
yeah,
very grateful.
That's the story.
That's the story.
It's quite a story. So looking forward, I hear you guys have been busy. Do you want to tell us, I guess before telling us a little bit about what we're going to see, maybe just kind of the thought process that went into these projects, why you chose these areas and why you see them as kind of areas where we need to learn more about them?
Yeah, so when Kip and I first started talking about this film, Cowspiracy, it was a lot bigger. It had a lot more elements to it, and as we were working on it and as we edited it, we realized that we couldn't fit all of this into one film. There was going to have to be multiple films. And so our next film, What the Health, picks up in the same sort of story of that Cowspiracy does. It's following Kip again on this journey, and it's finding out about the devastation that's going on with our health in the West and around the world today.
And the cover-ups, and it's kind of like the tagline of Cowspiracy, the film that environmental organizations don't want you to see. This one is the health film that health organizations don't want you to see. So we explore and we interview, or we try to interview, people like American Diabetes Association and American Heart Association that has an entire section of beef recipes on their website, and American Cancer Society. I want to go into it, but I can't. But it's just shocking, probably more shocking, and direct links to these industries in the pharmaceutical industry, because taking on the animal agriculture industry was enough. So like, okay, how about the pharmaceutical? And realizing how they work together and exploring that, and very shocking. But we're very happy with it, and it's coming along well. And probably only about 3 to 4 months away, and just finished an Indiegogo fundraising campaign. Anyone who helped, thank you so much, because we couldn't have done it without everyone's support. What we like about this film too is we explore the health not only of our own personal health, but when you think of true health, it's not only health of yourself, but it's health of you're really only healthy if your family's healthy, your community's healthy. And we explore that too. Go to North Carolina and talk to people who live by factory farms, almost like a Gasland. People have seen Gasland, the health of the industry. If you're in the slaughterhouse, if you work in the slaughterhouse and you work in this industry, it just covers all bases.
Yeah, it's separate from other health documentaries because it looks at the whole picture surrounding animal agriculture and the consumption, that it's not just consuming these products, that if you've seen Cowspiracy, you know the environmental impacts, but it's every aspect of it, and that there's a lot of different players. There's a lot more players actually with this health story than there is with the environmental story. Is there more questions?
Thank you. I asked you this question before. So the first one is about environmental impact. Second one about health. Are you going to make a film about ethics after that?
Maybe we will. We're still a little... Do it. Maybe we will.
Well, first, you could hear the Aronofsky in there. That was good. So I guess the larger question I have is, so some issues are really hard to perceive, right? And so climate change, it's weird, and this global animal ag stuff is also challenging. And it seems like health also falls into that same category of massive numbers of people suffering or dying, and yet it's just like a background. Maybe it's like similar to gun violence in America or something like this, right? How do we get to that point where we start caring about the numbers that are causing the harm instead of, or in addition to the other things that our brains are quicker to pick up on, right?
Has anyone seen Forks Over Knives? I think that's a good example of. I think what's really cool, excited about this film is, if you watch that film, I was so excited when that film came out because I wanted to show my parents that my dad had a heart attack when he was 49. I want to show anyone who's had any of these type of illnesses. So again, when it's about spreading the truth intrinsically, where you have a direct relationship with your own health, a lot of people don't care about the environment. Obviously, a lot of people don't care about animals, so you have the ethics gone or the environment gone. But almost everyone cares either about their health or their family's health. And so when ideally a film like this comes out, or Forks Over Knives, it spreads so fast because you just want to share this information with people so that when it comes out, it's again, like, you can take the information, you can take it however you want, but if you want to risk it and still eat these products, then that's really on you, but it's really risky. So I again, if we feel once the truth is coming out, which is coming out so fast, that's why this transformation is happening so fast, because all we're doing is we're coming back to who we've always been, and we just got away from for the past, several hundred years.
Yeah. Just one quick point or a question. Okay, so say we succeed in doing that in our country, our media culture, or something that we understand a little better. How is this going to be different than something like tobacco that we finally kind of realized was a social harm, and then they just figured out how to export it?
Yeah. I mean, I think as Kip brought up, I mean, we've seen, tobacco is a perfect example. The population became informed how terrible it was, and so the tobacco industry just said, okay, well, we'll just move to Southeast Asia and we'll promote our products there. That's exactly what we're seeing with the animal agriculture industry. I mean, the largest pig producer in the United States was acquired by a Chinese company. Same sort of thing. Pork consumption is going down in the United States. Let's move it into Asia. But what I think will happen is that if developing countries look to the West for models of how to grow and what they aspire for, if we're eating a predominantly plant-based diet, I think it will have an influence, and that we'll see that whether positively or negatively, we are role models for a lot of the world. Is that people will start to mirror what we're doing here. So I think there's a responsibility that everybody has, but I think there is, again, not saying that it's a good thing, but that the West does have a responsibility to be much more responsible.
So we would like to thank everybody for coming so much, especially undergrads, because we know it's midterm season. So we're very grateful for you coming and attending. Kip and Keegan, thank you so much for coming. You were so gracious and accepting, and I know you had to stop production and editing. Chris, thank you for moderating very much. We have our next event, March 22nd, Vegan Athletes, so please come and find out more about that. There are a couple of them in the audience if you can spot them. And there is a reception to follow, and we really want to thank the Animal Studies Initiative, Environmental Studies, and the Center for the Humanities. Please join me in thanking Kip and Keegan for coming.